The moment the lights dimmed and the crowd began to murmur, something strange happened inside the theater. It was that rare kind of silence that only comes before something unforgettable. Before you even know his name, before a single note is sung, let me ask you this: have you ever seen a moment so powerful that it makes you stop scrolling, sit up straight, and feel goosebumps all over? Because what happened on that America's Got Talent stage that night was not just a performance, it was a life-turning point. And before this story ends, if it touches your heart even a little, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this deserve to be shared. From the backstage corridor walked a man no one expected to matter. Slim build, slightly nervous smile, hair slicked back in an old-fashioned style that felt out of place in a modern talent show. His name was Daniel Reyes, a 34-year-old Filipino immigrant working 2 jobs in California, one as a delivery driver, the other as a hotel maintenance worker. To many in the audience, he looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong building. But to Daniel, that stage was the same dream he had carried since childhood, ever since his late father played Elvis Presley songs on a scratched cassette player in their tiny home in Cebu. Growing up, Daniel's life was never easy. His father was a construction worker who sang Elvis songs after long shifts just to make the family smile. His mother sold homemade food in the local market. Music was not a career, it was an escape. When his father passed away suddenly, Daniel was only 16. That was the night he sang Can't Help Falling in Love at the funeral, his voice shaking, tears streaming, but somehow steady enough to hold everyone together. From that moment on, Elvis wasn't just music to him, it was memory, pain, love, and hope wrapped into one voice. Years later, Daniel moved to the United States chasing a better future, not fame. He faced rejection after rejection, jobs that barely paid rent, nights sleeping in his car, people laughing at his accent, and countless auditions where he was told he didn't fit the market. At one point, he almost sold his last guitar just to buy groceries. But something inside him refused to quit. He promised himself that if he ever stopped singing, his father would truly be gone forever. Now here he was. America's Got Talent. The biggest stage of his life. As he introduced himself, the judges smiled politely, not expecting much. One judge even raised an eyebrow when Daniel said he would sing Elvis Presley. The audience chuckled softly. Everyone had heard Elvis before. Everyone thought they knew what was coming. The music started. The first note hit the room like a slow wave. Not loud. Not flashy. Just deep, warm, and heartbreakingly sincere. Within seconds, the laughter disappeared. Daniel's voice carried a raw emotion that didn't feel rehearsed, it felt lived. Each lyric sounded like a confession. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice never did. When he closed his eyes, it felt like he wasn't on stage anymore, he was back in that small Filipino home, singing beside his father. Halfway through the song, the camera cut to the judges. One leaned forward. Another swallowed hard. Simon Cowell, known for his brutal honesty, stopped writing notes and simply stared. The audience was frozen, not because of vocal tricks or high notes, but because they were witnessing truth. The kind of truth you can't fake. Then came the final note. Daniel held it longer than expected, his voice cracking just enough to remind everyone he was human. When the music ended, there was a split second of complete silence. And then an explosion. The entire theater rose to its feet. People screamed. Some cried. One judge wiped tears from their eyes. Simon stood up slowly, shaking his head in disbelief. When asked why he chose that song, Daniel's voice broke as he said, "My father taught me how to sing Elvis. He's gone now, but when I sing, he's still here." At that moment, the show stopped being a competition. It became a shared human experience. The judges didn't just praise his voice, they praised his courage, his heart, his story. One said, "You didn't just sing Elvis, you reminded us why music matters." Another called it one of the most honest performances the show had ever seen. Backstage, Daniel collapsed into tears. Years of doubt, pain, and silence finally released. For the first time in his life, he felt seen, not as an immigrant, not as a worker struggling to survive, but as an artist. What happened next changed everything. His audition went viral within hours. Millions of views. Messages poured in from Filipinos around the world, from immigrants, from people who had lost parents, from dreamers who were on the verge of giving up. Daniel didn't just inspire them, he represented them. And even if he didn't win the entire competition, he had already won something greater. He proved that dreams don't expire. That background doesn't define destiny. That sometimes, the most unreal moments come from the most overlooked people. So if you're watching this right now, feeling invisible, tired, or close to quitting, remember Daniel Reyes. Remember that one step onto a stage can change a lifetime. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs hope today. Because the next unreal moment might be yours. As the night went on, Daniel sat alone in the quiet corner of the backstage area, still shaking, still trying to understand what had just happened. The cheers were fading now, replaced by a heavy silence that felt almost unreal. He stared at his hands, the same hands that had fixed broken pipes, carried heavy boxes, and counted loose change at the end of long days. Those hands had just held an entire theater in silence. For years, he had imagined success as applause, but he never imagined it would feel this overwhelming. It wasn't pride he felt most, it was relief. Relief that his voice, his story, his father's memory had finally been heard. That night, Daniel barely slept. His phone kept buzzing with messages from numbers he didn't recognize. Old friends from the Philippines, distant relatives, former co-workers, even strangers from across the world wrote to him. Some said they cried watching him sing. Others said they saw their own struggles in his eyes. A message from his mother stood out above all: your father would be smiling so big right now. Daniel broke down again, covering his face, realizing that no trophy could ever mean more than that single sentence. The next weeks were a whirlwind. Interviews, rehearsals, and constant attention filled his days. Yet, despite the sudden spotlight, Daniel remained the same humble man. He still called his mother every morning. He still warmed up his voice in quiet corners, whispering prayers before singing. But the pressure was growing. With every new performance, expectations rose higher. People no longer saw just Daniel, they saw the Filipino Elvis, a symbol, a story they wanted repeated perfectly every time. Doubt slowly crept back in. What if the first audition was just luck? What if he couldn't live up to the moment that made everyone believe? During one rehearsal, his voice cracked badly, and he froze. The old fear returned, the fear of not being enough. He stepped outside, sat alone, and for the first time since the audition, considered walking away. Fame was loud. Fear was louder. That evening, one of the judges found him sitting there. No cameras. No audience. Just a quiet conversation. The judge told him something simple but powerful: you're not here to be perfect. You're here to be real. That's why people listened. Those words settled deep into Daniel's heart. He realized he had been trying to impress instead of express. He wasn't meant to copy Elvis, he was meant to honor him through his own truth. On his next performance night, Daniel walked onto the stage calmer than ever before. This time, he didn't imagine the crowd. He imagined his father sitting in the front row, smiling, nodding, proud. The song he chose wasn't the most famous Elvis hit. It was a softer, emotional piece that spoke of loss, resilience, and hope. As he sang, his voice carried something even deeper than before, not pain alone, but healing. The audience felt it instantly. The performance didn't end with explosive applause, it ended with quiet tears, hands over mouths, and hearts wide open. When the clapping finally came, it was slower, heavier, filled with respect. Daniel bowed his head, not as a performer seeking approval, but as a man grateful for the journey. Whether he advanced or not stopped mattering to him that night. He had already crossed the hardest stage, the one inside himself. He had faced fear, doubt, and years of silence, and he had answered them with song. After the show, he returned to his modest apartment, placed his father's old cassette player on the table, and played the same Elvis tape from his childhood. He sang along softly, smiling through tears. Daniel's life didn't magically become perfect. He still worked hard. He still struggled. But something had changed forever. He no longer questioned his worth. He no longer sang to be seen. As the season progressed, Daniel's journey on the show became more than just a series of performances, it became a mirror for millions of people watching at home. Every time he stepped onto the stage, he carried not only his own dreams but the silent hopes of immigrants, workers, and forgotten dreamers everywhere. Yet behind the calm smile he showed the cameras, a storm of emotions lived inside him. Fame arrived fast, but it did not erase years of struggle overnight. Instead, it forced him to confront them more deeply than ever before. Daniel often remembered his first days in America. He arrived with a small suitcase, a worn-out photo of his parents, and a belief that hard work would be enough. Reality hit quickly. Employers sought his accent before his skills. Landlords sought his lack of credit before his honesty. There were nights he stood under streetlights, guitar case open, singing Elvis songs to strangers who passed by without looking. Sometimes a few coins landed near his feet. Sometimes nothing did. But he sang anyway, because singing reminded him he was still alive. Back on the AGT stage, the pressure intensified with every round. Social media praised him, but it also judged him harshly. Some people accused him of using his story for sympathy. Others said Elvis songs were outdated. Reading those comments reopened old wounds. For years, Daniel had been invisible. Now he was visible, and that visibility came with pain. He learned quickly that applause and criticism are twins, born at the same moment. One evening, after a particularly harsh wave of online negativity, Daniel called his mother. He tried to sound strong, but she heard the crack in his voice immediately. She reminded him of something he had forgotten: you didn't start singing to impress people. You started singing to survive. That sentence stayed with him long after the call ended. He realized that somewhere along the way, fear of losing approval had started to control him. And fear had never helped him before. For the next performance, Daniel made a bold choice. He blended Elvis's classic style with subtle Filipino musical elements, soft rhythms inspired by the songs his mother used to hum while cooking. It was risky. It was different. But it was honest. As the music began, Daniel felt something shift inside him. He wasn't trying to be anyone else anymore. He wasn't chasing a label. He was simply telling his story in sound. The reaction was electric. The judges were stunned by the uniqueness of the performance. The audience didn't just clap, they leaned into it, as if afraid to miss a single note. For the first time, Daniel smiled mid-song, not from nerves, but from joy. When it ended, the applause felt less like judgment and more like gratitude. That night, he understood something powerful: authenticity creates connection deeper than perfection ever could. As weeks turned into months, Daniel's life outside the show also began to change. Opportunities came his way: small concerts, collaborations, interviews. But he remained cautious. He had seen others rise too fast and fall just as quickly. He wanted something lasting, something rooted in purpose, not just popularity. He continued working part-time, grounding himself in routine, refusing to forget where he came from. One day, he received an invitation that left him speechless. A Filipino community center invited him to perform for families who reminded him of his own: immigrants working tirelessly, children growing up between cultures, parents carrying dreams they never got to live. When Daniel stepped into that modest hall and saw the faces staring back at him, tears welled up. This performance mattered more than any televised stage. He sang with everything he had. Parents cried. Children stared in awe. Elderly men nodded slowly, understanding every emotion without needing words. Afterward, people hugged him, thanked him, told him he made them feel proud of who they were. That night, Daniel felt complete in a way fame could never offer. He wasn't just singing for himself anymore, he was giving voice to a community. Back on AGT, the competition narrowed. Each elimination felt heavier. Daniel befriended other contestants, each with their own struggles, their own reasons for standing there. Behind the scenes, they shared stories, fears, and late-night laughter. The show might have been a competition, but it also became a family, one formed by vulnerability rather than rivalry. As the finals approached, Daniel's nerves returned stronger than ever. This was the biggest moment of his life. Win or lose, it would define how the world remembered him. On the night before the final performance, he couldn't sleep. He walked outside, looked up at the sky, and spoke softly as if his father could hear him. He thanked him. For the music. For the courage. For the strength to keep going when quitting felt easier. On finale night, the theater buzzed with energy. When Daniel's name was announced, his heart raced, but his steps were steady. He stood center stage, lights shining down, audience silent. This time, he didn't see the judges or the cameras. He saw every version of himself, the boy in Cebu, the grieving teenager, the struggling immigrant, the man who almost gave up. He sang not just an Elvis song, but a life story wrapped in melody. His voice rose and fell like waves, carrying loss, love, fear, and hope all at once. When he reached the final note, he didn't hold it for drama. He let it go gently, trusting the silence that followed. The applause was thunderous, but Daniel barely heard it. He felt light, as if something heavy had finally been released from his chest. Whatever happened next no longer mattered. He had said everything he needed to say. When the results were announced, Daniel didn't win first place. For a brief second, disappointment flickered across his face. Then something unexpected happened. The audience stood up anyway. The judges praised him not as a runner-up, but as a true artist. Social media exploded, not with pity, but with respect. Offers poured in: record labels, tours, collaborations, but more importantly, messages from people saying his journey changed their lives. Daniel smiled as he walked off the stage that final time. He had not won a trophy, but he had won something far greater: freedom. Freedom from doubt. Freedom from silence. Freedom to believe in his voice. Months later, Daniel released his first independent album. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't overproduced. It was honest. Each song carried a piece of his story. The album didn't top every chart, but it reached the people who needed it most. Concert halls filled slowly, steadily, with fans who came not just to hear him sing, but to feel understood. Daniel eventually returned to the Philippines for the first time since his audition. He stood on a small stage in Cebu, singing under the open sky. His mother sat in the front row, tears streaming freely. As he sang, Daniel felt a sense of peace he had chased his entire life. The journey had come full circle. His story reminds us that unreal moments don't always look like victory on paper. Sometimes, they look like survival. Like persistence. Like choosing to believe in yourself when the world doubts you. Daniel Reyes stepped onto the AGT stage as an unknown man carrying an old dream. He walked away as a symbol of hope, not because he won, but because he dared to be real. And if you're watching this right now, holding onto a dream that feels too big, too late, or too impossible, remember this story. Remember that one step, one song, one moment of courage can change everything. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And somewhere out there, the world is waiting to hear it.